Wednesday, the 4th of July, 2018. Happy 242nd anniversary for America and all my American viewers. Happy Independence Day. Billy is here this morning. He's guarding the Stars and Stripes there safely. So aside from looking at the markets this morning, yes, the markets are open. Things are trading in London and in Europe. It will be closed in the US, but you will still have the futures trading today. So the currencies will trade, the futures will trade. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the markets, what they're doing this morning, and then I'll have a look at some of the founding fathers some of the issues to do with money and precious metals and U.S. independence. And then I'll also look at some statistics. I'll look at something I saw in The Economist, and I'll look at shadow stats, John Williams, look at inflation, GDP, and unemployment in the U.S. So it's 8:20 a.m., so fairly early. What are the markets doing this morning? Well, the precious metals are continuing to trade up. They had a good day yesterday. Gold this morning is up $7 at $12.60. The low's been $12.50, $1.70, and the high $12.60, $1.46. So that's a pretty good big move. I think yesterday we traded below $12.40. So we've rebounded quite well. Silver's back above $16. It's up 10 this morning. It's at $16.11. The range has been $15.98 to $16.16. The Dow futures is trading today. That's up 11. So marginally, virtually unchanged. 24,195. Yesterday we had a down day in the stock market. S&P is up 3, 2716. The NASDAQ future is at 70,017, up only 8. Currency-wise, we got the pound up slightly on 20 pips, marginally higher at 132.10. The euro is at 116.64, virtually unchanged. And the dollar is a little weaker against the yen, down 0.2% at 110.38. Oil, yesterday, there's still a lot of speculation about oil and that the Saudis will help out. Oil came off below, I think, 72, but now it's at 72.87 WTI, pretty much unchanged. Brent crude is around 78, so still quite elevated. You can see that they're trying to keep oil from going a lot higher because we are very near. Well, we made a 3.5-year high the other day, and now, there's been all these comments and tweets from Trump and everything. So that's what's happening with oil. Cryptocurrencies, they had a good rally yesterday. They've come off a little bit this morning. They're in the red. If you look at WorldCoin Index or Coin Market Cap, so not much going on there. The other thing I wanted to talk about is further along after the Constitution was written, there's a lot of debate about the money question. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, that's on money, and it's really clear, the powers of Congress. It says to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin, and fix the standards of weights and measures. And it also says, that's Clause 6, to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States. So what does the securities mean? Well, it also gave, Article 1 gave Section 8, Clause 2 gave Congress the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. It didn't give it power to issue money, but to borrow money, right? And that's something that's always been debated. you know, whether they, like for example, I found in the heritage.org website, coinage clause, and they're talking about this debate. It says, and they repeat Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, the Congress shall have the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin. And it goes on to say, Congress's power to coin money is exclusive under Article 1, Section 10. The states are not permitted to coin money, emit bills of credit, and make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt. Whereas the prohibitions on the states are clear and detailed. Congress's grant of power under coinage clause is open-ended. So it doesn't talk about whether Congress has the power to emit bills of credit. So that's, it does say that Congress has the power to borrow money. Personally, I think that coining money just means coin, you know, specie coin, gold and silver. Of course, it's been perverted, but that's the way it is. There are people who mention Thomas Jefferson, his quotation about banks and the dangers of banks. I went into the Monticello.org website. They think that the quotation on private banks is a spurious quotation. Even if it's spurious, it makes sense, and this is what he's supposed to have said, even though some people question it. He says, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations will grow up around them, will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it belongs. That's, yeah, we're not sure, you know, even the Monticello website, not too sure about that he made that quotation, but his ideas on banking were fairly similar. So what do we have now? Well, we have a hybrid central bank that allows for the private banks to issue money. They do it through fractional reserve. And then you have to go also to Benjamin Franklin at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. And I take this from whatwoulddthefoundersthink.com. And it says, at the close of the Constitutional Convention of 1787, Franklin was queried as he left Independence Hall on the final day of deliberation. In the notes of Dr. James McHenry, one of Maryland's delegates to the convention, a lady asked Dr. Franklin, well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy? Franklin replied, a republic, if you can keep it. So there you go. It's not easy. So I personally, well, I'm not an American, but I've learned, I did American history in school. I think it was very interesting. So what do we need now? What does the world need? What does America need to do? I think America needs to declare monetary independence. And how do you do that? Well, you go back to the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5. I think it's very clear. Congress has the power only to coin money. It should abolish the Federal Reserve because, yeah, I think it's kind of perverted the Constitution. I think that Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. It was passed by Congress and it was signed into law by Woodrow Wilson, but if you look at when they voted for the Federal Reserve Act, it was on just Christmas Eve. I think most people had gone home in 1913 for Christmas, so it was easy to get it through Congress. And I think Woodrow Wilson was under the thumb of the bankers. And the same thing happened at the Bank of England in 1694. They only had very few people in Parliament voting for that, even though most of Parliament was against it. So yeah, it's very, very tricky. Most people, the general public, they don't want to know about these things. They make it too complicated. Even nowadays, there are questions whether the Constitution allowed for Congress to emit bills or issue paper money. I don't think it did. But even the experts don't know it. So they make it really complicated. Now I want to look at quickly at some of these statistics from shadow stats, which I talked about earlier. I mean, we are told a lot that Europe is in trouble, the euro is in trouble. Yes, and that's true to some extent. You've got countries like Italy, you've got the Brexit, even though the UK is not part of the euro. The UK, we're part of the EU, but we have our own currency. But when you look at the economics, I've got this page here, economic data from The Economist, the most recent one, and it says US GDP for the first quarter of 2018, 2.8%. Looks really good, doesn't it? And then you look at the euro area, which is all the countries that hold the euro, it says 2.5%, right? So you'd think, wow, the US is doing a lot, is growing more than the euro area. But then, as I've spoken about before, the budget deficit, government spending is part of GDP. So if the government is overspending and has a huge deficit, that's going to make the GDP look better, right? So we go to the United States and we move to the right towards the end of that row, and you see budget balance, percentage of GDP 2018. It says United States minus 4.6%. So the US is running almost a 5% deficit. So if the US government was running, federal government was running a balanced budget, we would have GDP at minus 2.2%. The same thing with Britain. We've got 1.2% GDP, budget deficit minus 1.8. So if the government was running a balanced budget, we'd have negative 0.6 of growth, right? Euro area, so 2.5% GDP, right? Budget balance minus 0.8. So the euro area, the countries that hold the euro, have almost a balanced budget. So if you take minus 0.8 from 2.5, that means they're actually growing. The private sector in the GDP in the euro area is growing by 1.7% if you don't add the budget deficits. So which country is doing better really? Or which group, euro area is not a country, but the countries that use the euro are actually growing on a real basis more than the United States. The United States is looking good only because of spending. So that's what I wanted to talk about. And that's not to slag off the US on Independence Day. This is just to show you how, not to buy into a lot of the stuff we hear. So inflation as well. You look at shadow stats, alternate inflation charts. 1990 based inflation, we are over 6%, as you can see here on the top chart. Bottom chart, 1980 based inflation, we are above 10% in the US. GDP, his alternate GDP calculation, we're actually at, negative, and it's been at negative since, almost the whole of this century. US GDP, according to John Williams of shadowstats.com. And unemployment, same story. His alternate unemployment, the shadow stats unemployment, according to him, if you go back to how unemployment was calculated before 1994, we are above 20%. So there you have it. His April unemployment rate is 21.5% to be exact. So I wish all my American viewers a nice 4th of July. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. You You can also follow me on DTube, Steemit, and on Twitter. And I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.